Hop Edition podcast is brought to you in association with Brew Keg Tap, the number one choice for all your beer dispense and kegging needs, and specialists in the supply of Kegland brewing equipment to the UK market. So next time you're in need of taps, kegs, or anything with a Zilla on the end, get over to brewkegtap.co.uk and tell them the Hop Edition sent you. We would also like to thank all our patrons for their continued support with running and developing the pod. If you would like to become a member and gain access to exclusive perks and benefits, head over to patreon.com/the Hop Edition podcast. Now pour yourself a cold one and enjoy the episode.
What up, everyone? Welcome back to another Saturday night with the Hop Edition crew coming at you. And we've got a special guest tonight. We've got Gary Farlow from Vocation. And Gary is, I think, specialises in the barrel aging aspect of the Vocation Brewery. So say hi, Gary.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Yes, you're not wrong there. Well. Quite a lot.
No worries, Gary. Hopefully that improves as we go. Hello to everyone listening live. Guys, how we doing this evening?
It's been a hell of a day, Owen. It's been a hell of a day, but I'm good now. I found time to have a shave and a shower, and I'm ready to drink.
You managed to get a brewing, Chris. That's a successful day, right?
I got a brewing, mate. I got a brewing. I hit all my
numbers.
We
all got a brewing, really. So, yeah.
Did you get a brewing today, Gary?
Unfortunately, not. No, I got enough in during midweek that.
Oh dear! Technical issues already off the bat. Are you on Wi-Fi, perchance, Gary?
I am on Wi-Fi.
Okay, because something's absolutely slamming your connection, mate.
I honestly don't know what it could be.
Well,
it's all good. It's all good. It seems to have fixed itself.
Yeah, it seems to have sort of sorted itself out a little bit. Strange. So we'll press on. Hopefully that was lost. Yeah, fingers crossed, Gary. Just say before we start and get stuck into talking about all things barrel-aged beers and what's going on at Vocation and all of that good stuff, just a big shout out to our Patreons and also our commercial sponsor, Brew Keg Tap. So, Gary, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm literally, as we've started there, I've just finished the Can of Crush Hour and just cracked into second beer of the night, which is Life and Death for me.
Lovely. Is that one of your go-tos for the Vocation core range?
They certainly are for the core range. To be honest, I think I've drunk more of that than I've brewed in the last week. Certainly feels like with the weather we've had.
That's an impressive amount of drinking.
Several hectolitres.
It is when you know the volumes.
Yes.
Yes. Approximately. Just quick maths. Approximately 500 hectolitres a week on average.
500 hec. It's like 50,000 litres. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, give or take, weekly.
Weekly?
Weekly,
small brewery then, Vocation, right?
It's
small brewery.
Small brewery.
Decent output.
But the brewery itself is smaller than you think. It's just the output.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get stuck into that a bit later and you tell us all about the kit and how it all works at Vocation.
Absolutely.
Chris, what are you drinking?
Well, given the fact that I've been trying to drink this for a while, I'm on Vocation's Hop, Skip and Juice. Recommended by a friend, somebody who lives local to me who's big into Vocation. In fact, Vocation is pretty much all he drinks. That and the bloke up the road whose name I can't remember, who we all thought he'd retired, but he decided not to in the end. But this is a cracking beer. It's super fruity and it's just, well, it's smashable since I only popped this about 5 minutes ago. Beautiful beer, love it. Getting lots of those tropical notes and a very overriding flavour of peach which I am not entirely unhappy about. Cracking beer.
Very nice.
Lush Tings.
Indeed.
I haven't got that beer, so I'm gonna just, take your word for it, Chris, and lick my wounds.
That's
I'm
all right.
not drinking that right now. Tricky, what are you drinking, mate?
So I thought I'd ease myself in because there's a possibility of some slightly stronger beers coming up later. So I went for the lowest ABV one that I could find out of the box that I got delivered the other day, which is the Bread and Butter Dry Hopped Pale, which clocks in at 3.9%, Citra Mosaic and Simcoe. And it's just a very, very light in colour as well. Very refreshing. Pale ale. So lovely aroma. Definitely get the Citra Mosaic coming through on that, and it's super crisp, very clean, drinkable, a nice, easy starter beer. I think that's good barbecue drinking. I think that one for me, that would be something I wouldn't mind a few cans of that for when the weather gets really hot.
I've realised I've fucked up. I've started at 5.7. Yeah, that's a fatal error for me. Fatal error.
You could have gone with the small IPA as well, Chris.
I could have done. It's in the fridge, mate. It's all in the fridge.
It's too late now. The only way is up from here.
Yeah, well, you can always throttle back. It's only one.
No. That's not allowed.
No.
Not allowed.
I think you should just step it straight up to an MP next, Chris.
Yeah, okay. No, but go on.
I am drinking my Kolsch, which I kegged, I think, last weekend. I did a double batch of Kolsch. Changed up the hops slightly from the last time I made it. I think I ended up using quite a bit more Mittel through. So, definitely got like a fruitier aroma on it. Still clearing up mine. It's not super clear yet. But I'm pretty pleased with it. It's pretty crisp. Nice malt backbone. I also used Cross My Loof.
Hell?
Not the Hell. No, I used their sort of cream ale sort of yeast. What's it called? Kentucky. I think it's called Kentucky. And I'm not sure if I like it quite as much as the one I used last time, which I'm trying to recall which one I used last time. I think it might have been the Lallemand Cologne yeast.
Colne.
Mm-hmm.
Just to annoy Jesper and the Swedish chef, we'll just call it Colne. Just to annoy him. There's a long running joke, Gary, right? We say Kolsch, they bollockers and say it's Kulsch, and we still say Kolsch because we enjoy winding. Well, I enjoy winding people up.
Or any sort of iteration of that kind of pronunciation, like Kulsch. Kolsch.
It also sounds better with the accent.
Any of those.
Thomas is in the house. The Swedish chef is in the house.
He's already correcting us on the pronunciation of.
Yeah, see, we're getting bollocked already.
There you go.
Standard practice.
So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. I was going to talk. I'm also drinking. I'm drinking 2 beers. I'm drinking my IPL as well. But given that we're going to be talking more about that in depth when we talk to Andrew from Lallemand in a future podcast, I won't go into depth on that. So all good. All good. So Gary, we're going to hand over to you for a minute. Talk to us a little bit about Vocation, what you do at Vocation, and ease us in.
Vocation. I've been there for 5.5 of the approximately 8 years that the brewery's been running now. Very much in the early days, it was all about the hop forward beers, all about the American style IPAs, the Citra Mosaic, and pretty much that was it in the very early days, at least. Obviously, since then, and it's certainly in no small part because of me, the influence has certainly gone more towards the darker side, with the Imperial Stouts, and then developing into the barrel store. When we first got our barrels in, the first recipe they ever let me design, they just said free reign, do what you want. I brewed an Imperial Stout, and half of that went to barrels, and we had 4 on site at the time. After 12 months, 4 grew to 40, and 12 months after that, 40 grew to 400 barrels. We now have a dedicated barrel store that's in a unit right next to the brewery, and 400 has now grown into over 500, and hopefully by Christmas this year we will have just shy of 600 in there.
Wow.
So yeah, quite a few barrels.
Yeah, Chris, you're on mute in case you're wanting to talk.
God damn freaking right! 1 second. I have a picture of the barrel store. There you go.
Oh.
There's the barrel store. It's a little one. And just in case anyone's getting any ideas, because me, I thought about this as well. It's a 24-hour site, so you're not doing a smash and grab with an Arctic either. It's just not happening. Right. Plus, they're all Yorkshire lads, and it don't take one to kick all you shandy drinking Southerners into oblivion. So
how many barrels have we got in there currently, Gary?
That is one side of it there, and what you're currently looking at is just shy of 200 barrels. Anything that's got what you can see there is just a white sticker is filled. So there are 4 in the top right corner that don't have anything in. The ones that are immediately under in the center of the image have got nothing in, and the ones over by the big glass wall have got nothing in. I think there's a little stack of 6 on the opposite side. Other than that, every single barrel in there is filled. And the size of the barrels there range from between 200 litres to about 320, depending on where the barrels came from and what they originally held.
Small then, yeah?
Yeah, it's just average, I suppose.
Yeah. There's also these wonderful labels on stuff as well. So it tells you the product.
Yeah, I didn't want to give too much away on that, but yeah.
No, you've managed to blank out a good proportion of it, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, that's
yeah. So the other info that you're missing there. The other info you're missing there is any adjuncts added to the barrels, so any fresh fruit and things like that, or for example, coffee, coconut, things like that. And obviously ABV have left that one off for good reason. And then barrel type as well. So that barrel was bourbon, but it's not the only one we've got in there with that particular beer.
So that's interesting there, Gary. So you're saying that you guys will add certain adjuncts to the barrel as well. So you're racking the beer and then aging it.
We certainly do,
adjuncts.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's an interesting way to do it.
We have done in the past with some of them that we've already released. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So what?
So some of them we have done before. Fruit's a big one, but we'll add all sorts into the barrels. Like I said, coffee and coconut's another 2. There's a massive range of fruit that we've got in there. Adjunct's a bit of a broad term. It's not always adjuncts. So any barrels where we've purposely inoculated them with things like Brett or Pedio, things like that will be labelled on there as well to make sure that they are quarantined from everything else.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Must be challenging. So what styles of beer typically make their way into barrel, Gary?
He's frozen up.
It's the obvious with Imperial Stout. I mean, you're probably familiar with some of the releases we've already had. You guys there? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back, mate. You're back.
You're there. Yeah. Apart from the obvious Imperial Stouts, we've got plenty of different types of sours in there. So it's not just the kettle sours and such there, fruited and unfruited. There's wild fermentation in there. We've got Baltic porters. We've got a range of Belgian styles, some of which, one of which I do actually have for drinking later on this evening with a saison. We've got wee heavies we released recently. There is also some slightly more unusual things in there in the lines of American browns, aging away, hopefully that might make an appearance later this year.
Gary, we have a quick question from Simon Seaton. I'm going to pop it up on the screen. He wants to know how many Snicker bars.
Of course he has. I'm not sure what that's. That certainly haven't had put any Snickers into anything.
I think he's referring to the Snickers beer that was released earlier on the gift set that I got that was amazing.
Yeah, I had.
Go on.
By which it certainly wasn't Snickers. It was peanut caramel chocolate stout.
Yeah, and it said literally like almost Snickers on the can, but you know, it's all good. It's all good. I just want to take a quick second and say thanks to Simon Seaton, because I've been trying to get in touch with somebody at Vocation, and I've been knocked back a few times when I've sent in emails requesting, for somebody to come on the podcast. And he went, "Oh, I'll email Gary." So he's emailed Gary, and then Gary's got in touch with me, and it's like, boom, we've made it happen. So yeah, this is thanks, Simon. You're a star, mate.
Another quick question out of the chat, as you've just mentioned the saison, and our friend Brett has one ready to drink. What temperature do you recommend for serving for that beer?
I would definitely say straight out the fridge would be best. Same as any traditional saison of that sort. It's certainly not quite as lively as something along the lines of saison Dupont, but it's definitely one that works better being crisp and cool. So. It's a very, very dry one, but it's a surprising sweetness because it's coming from a wine barrel. But yeah, I actually believe this one got in the region of about 1002, 1003 as final gravity. So it's a very dry beer.
Wow, that is pretty dry.
Did it have any other kind of bacteria, or is it kind of a straight saison, just barrel aged?
Straight saison barrel aged this one. We utilised a non-diastatic saison used to see how this one turned out, because it's only the second saison we've ever brewed. The first of which was a good few years ago with the addition of elderflower in there. Don't know if anybody remembers that one. We thought we'd try this one out because it was a readily available strain. It was about the flavour profile on the yeast, so we thought we'd try it because. Certainly on a larger scale, it can be a bit risky throwing diastaticus in the main brew house. Lesser risk in the barrel store, but not so much. It's certainly not a desired thing to get anywhere near supermarkets.
Was that the Laumond farmhouse yeast that you were using? Because that's non-diastatic.
I believe it was, yes. It was definitely Laumond, but as to specifics, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head right now. But yes, it was non-diastatic.
Nice. And so I had a question about the barrel store. Is there a particular ABV that you tend to? Is there like a minimum ABV that you tend to try and hit before stuff goes in barrel, Gary?
Obviously, the higher the ABV, the better, in the sense that higher alcohol content has more longevity in the barrels and more resistance to things like wild bacteria and wild yeast and such. Apart from anything else, bigger beer is better.
Bigger is better.
Anyway.
No, there's a lot of people would agree with you.
I think as a rule of thumb, 7+.
7+. Yeah.
As a general rule of thumb, I'd say at least 7 before it hits barrels. But all depends on the style really. So the saison was, I believe, 7.5 or thereabouts. Stouts, I think we've only actually got 2 in there that are sub 10 at the moment.
Nice.
So we do try and keep those
2.
pretty high.
So how many
special beers for a reason?
How many, off the top of your head, just a guess, maybe you know precisely, how many different beers do you have in the barrel store? So different batches.
As far as
of
different
beer.
guiles, basically when you're looking at those photos that were up before, I don't know if you've got them on quick reference again there, but essentially every 2 rows has 3 brews in there. Some of them are obviously duplicated. The larger releases, i.e. the Mint Choc, which is currently in markets, we need a lot of that in there. But as a general rule, yeah, for every 2 rows you see there, there's three different batches there. So approximately maybe 50, 60 different beers.
50 or 60 different beers. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
big,
So
big
every time you see a row of 2, so each one there, it's 4 high and between 3 and 4 deep. And some of these where the half stacks, they're actually coming forward almost 5 rows forward. So yeah, they're quite large volumes.
Nice. So Gary, tell us a bit about like what your role is at Vocation. Then what is it you do in the barrel store and broadly across the brewery?
Yeah, so as far as the barrel store goes, it's pretty much everything in there. So the daily tasks with cleaning, the line that goes in there, but that extends further across the board as well. So general recipe design is all me. So between myself and our brewing director Matt, all new recipes pretty much come from us. So if the recipes don't come from us, certainly the ideas do at least. From there, shut up, Simon. From there, the just day-to-day running, planning, management. It's a massive spectrum for the things I cover at the brewery now. But it's honestly, I could start listing them now and still be going by the time I reach the next beer. But summing it up, really, it's day-to-day planning, actual site management, and barrel store upkeep and planning.
Cool. So you yourself aren't actually doing the hot side brewing, but you are kind of defining the recipes and the design shape of beers.
On occasion, it's not a different anymore. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. When I started there, it was originally as brewery assistant. It was cask filling, cask washing, digging out for the guys who couldn't be bothered to dig out for themselves, learning what I'm doing there, all while brewing at home, and essentially developed it from there. And over the last 5.5 years, gone from brewery assistant to technical brewer. I've certainly done my fair share of shifts on the brew kits, and still do on the odd occasion now. We cover shifts for some of the special releases as well. I'll get my hands dirty in those still. But no, the day-to-day we leave to the production brewers now.
Yeah, nice.
There's a hierarchy, and he's not at the bottom. That's what I'm taking from that.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
One of the things that I was sort of interested in as far as the barrel aging goes is just as a more general to kind of, complete the picture. Why do breweries barrel age beer? What does it bring to the beer? And more importantly, how long do you leave them in the barrel before you actually take them out? And then this is the most important part. How long does it take for them to calm down when they've come out the barrel before you put them into, I presume you move them straight into bottles, but how long does it take for them to sort of calm down and be drinkable? Because Owen sent me a beer that he'd aged on oak chips, and he sent it me. I put it in the fridge for a year, and then he sent me another bottle, which I drank straight away. One tasted like I was chewing on a plank of wood, and the other one tasted really nice and very calm and chill.
Well, I think that the main reason that they're doing it and what it's coming from it is obviously the development of the flavour. So there is only so far you can take an imperial stout without adding adjuncts, and although there's plenty of variety out there with different malts, you're still going to potentially end up with similar results if you're using similar sort of ratios. So adding to a barrel, it's adding another element to it. It's another layer of complexity there, and with the range of barrels you've got there, that it's just opening up an exponential level of the different flavors and profiles you can add there. So obviously a wine barrel is going to have a fruitier profile. A bourbon barrel adds elements more along the lines of vanilla or coconut. A whiskey barrel makes it taste like you're drinking a pint of whiskey, which in my opinion is certainly no bad thing. But yeah, so it's just adding another layer, another flavor, and another way of just sort of expanding those flavors. It also has the added benefit of certainly when you're brewing something really strong, on the odd occasion it does come out too boozy. If it is too boozy, time does help mellow that. So in the same sense that leaving it in the barrel for longer, the flavors from the barrel itself will mellow. The actual alcohol content and such will also mellow within the beer, the pre-barrel, as it were. So it's a good way to essentially just mature the beer. Mature the beer, add another layer to it. It certainly takes longer with barrels than it would for oak chips, and that comes down to more of a article side of things, where you think about surface area. So chips in a beer, certainly on home level, which I've done myself a fair amount, there's a lot more contact with those than there would be if it was inside, say, a 40 litre. Whereas if you think about that, when the smaller it is, there's more surface area. So when you get into things like 200, 300, 400 litres, the surface area there, it's a lot smaller. So it takes longer for the contact time for the barrel to have an impact on the beer. So oak chips certainly have their advantage there. It's certainly not limited to home brewers either. Commercial breweries do also utilise oak chips quite a bit, and they can do so very well if done right. So they'll use things like hop rockets and hop cannons and that, and essentially push the beer through it. It's not just for additions of hops, as the name might suggest. It also, you can add any sort of adjunct to it, and oak chips are included there. So yeah, that answers that bit. What else were we going on? What was the other questions there? There was quite a few there. I can't remember the others.
Essentially, is oxygen exposure, because these barrels aren't going to be like completely sealed. There is going to be some transfer of oxygen into the beer. Is that an issue? Is like oxygenation of the beer whilst it's in the barrel, is that a problem?
Certainly to a lesser extent with these beers than it might, for example, with something like that that's absolutely loaded with hops. Oxygen stout, some would argue it can actually be slightly more beneficial to it, because some of the elements it does bring forward, IPAs and such, might get along the lines of cardboard. It's not at all, but something else that does is that it can come across a little bit sweeter, a little bit more like caramel, which certainly a stout. But at the same time, there's much more in a stout, and the extra things picking up from the wood that you're not really going to pick up quite so much of those flavors there. It's going to happen. There's nothing we can do to stop it. So it's one of those just working well with it. It doesn't always work, like you said before. That I do recall Lacey got some bottles. One tasted great. One just tasted like you're chewing on a lollipop stick. That is a sign of oxidation on a negative scale. We've all experienced that. We've had a couple in the brewery that have gone that way. One or two barrels that certainly not come out great. We've and then developed those a little bit further. There, some of the ones we might have inoculated. We have poured a couple of things just because it's not working. It's pointless trying to release a subpar beer. So yeah, it is a potential issue, but at the same time, it's less of an issue than it might be for a fresh product.
So Gary, in terms of like how long beers tend to stay in barrel, is that I'd imagine that's a spectrum, depending on the beer style, depending on the ABV. But is a part of your role just trying to determine when a beer is ready for release? Are you sort of tasting the beers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Often? Yeah.
Is this where you go around and pull the little nail out
it's
of the barrel?
It certainly is. It's not quite as glamorous as it sounds, but yes, it does involve tasting on a weekly basis, both fresh and barrel-aged products. as part of not just my role. There's a number of us as a full sensory group, as it were. We do try them. We don't have a set sort of date for it. We don't put a beer into barrel and say, right, this one is coming out in 6 months. This one is in 12 months. No, not daily on the barrels, Simon. Daily on everything else, just not the barrels. Barrels are about weekly. But yes, so we will try them. We will try them. But we don't say, right, we're going to release. We've brewed this one. We'll release it in 6 months. We brewed this one. We'll release it in 12 months. It's always, we do try them weekly. We don't try every single batch. That would be probably near impossible. I don't think any of us would be fit to drive home if we tried every single barrel. But we will work through them all. We'll try 10 different guiles, see which ones are happy with, see which ones not. It's all logged. It's not just a case of getting a drink, trying it, and getting pissed in the office on a Tuesday afternoon. It's we do to keep full sensory records of all these sort of things, and any that we're happy with for potential release within the next couple of months. And if some of them we don't think are quite getting there, we can then look at putting something into the barrel if we think it just needs another element to it. But yeah, it really is a matter of it. Like you said, ABV does have a massive impact on it as well. So something lower end, we'd probably look at trying to release it sooner. But it can also be down to the type of barrel. So we had rum barrels not too long back. Well, I say not too long than I realised, near 2 or 3 years back now. And those, anything more than about 6 months, and the banana that was coming from the rum became almost unbearable. So we couldn't leave those in any longer than that. Whereas something like the whiskey barrels, anything less than a year, and it really was like trying to chug a pint of carbonated whiskey. It was, if it wasn't the flavour profile that you were used to or something you enjoyed, it was absolutely brutal. So the longer we leave those to sit, the more they're mellowing, the more they're blending and maturing with the beer that's in the barrel. So they are only improving from there. So time is both a beneficial part and a detriment to it, depending on the style. It is a fine line.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a question here about as you started to talk about the difference in the barrels, Gary. So what did the different woods bring?
Yeah.
What are the different barrel types, which I think you've kind of touched on a little bit? What do they bring to the pie? And how many batches do you tend to get per barrel? How long can you use a barrel for?
It's quite a broad spectrum on there, depending on what the barrel is and what it was previously used for, how well it's been looked after, what it was like before it reached us. Something like a bourbon barrel, we into the bourbon content is still there in the background, but certainly nowhere near as potent as it might have been at the start. Something like the whiskey barrels, around I think second and third use of those. Whiskey's mellowed a bit on those, but at the same time, because some of the barrels are that old, upkeep is a bit more difficult, so I don't think we'll get much more use out of those. The rum ones I just mentioned, we got 2 uses out of those, and on the second use, we decided we're not going to use them again because we lost more beer than we actually managed to get out of them, just because the barrels themselves were so poorly maintained before they reached us that they were just going salvaging. But yeah, French wine barrels are absolutely phenomenal to work with. They look that well shaped and well formed, and some of those were into 6 and 7 now. The wine character's not quite as potent anymore, so it's probably not something we'd release and say it's a red barrel or a white barrel. We'd just release it as a barrel aged beer, but then that just gives us a new scope there that we can, like I said, with adding adjuncts as well, we can then just have a barrel aged beer with coffee. We can have a barrel aged beer with raspberries, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the spirit or the previous liquid, and that doesn't have to be the focus of the barrel aging itself anymore. So yeah, the range on it is really, really vast. So anywhere between two and 6 at least is what we've found so far, but there's certainly more range on some of them.
Just because I know that there's a couple of people who I know who've bought barrels specifically to do barrel aging of a beer. Obviously, on a homebrew scale, we're talking teeny tiny barrels. But would you recommend that those barrels are filled with something before you actually put beer into them? Or is this a case of purely putting it in a barrel and aging it can have an effect on the flavour which is desirable. Because I know somebody who bought one brand spanking new, and he was on about putting an Impy in it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely no reason why you couldn't just put a beer straight into it. It's not all about the spirit or the wine. Like I said, there is scope within those for the ones where we're getting repeated use. But something I'm looking at the moment for expansion is looking at what's referred to as like naked barrels. So they are fresh barrels. There's nothing in them before. And even the type of wood there can have an impact on the flavour. So oak being the most common type of barrel, the wood profile that people get from barrels, not just the spirit or the wine things, that is majority oak. But then you look down the cypress wood. If anybody's familiar with Siren Brewery, they have a combination of chips and with the barrels, and I know they are quite experienced in using cypress wood. That's just another example there that the different type of wood will add a whole different element to the beer. It doesn't just have to be barrel. But as far as adding things to it beforehand, that can be done as well. I know people that have done the same where they've bought like a 40-litre wooden barrel, and the first thing they do is throw a bottle of whiskey in there, and once or twice a week, a roll barrel round helps soak the whiskey into the wood. And that can have a similar effect, certain experience, and give it the sort of illusion that it's been barrel aged in a much larger barrel, i.e. a whiskey barrel. So that's always an opportunity and an option to do there. Certainly on a small scale. There's no reason why either wouldn't work.
I've got a question about, I know like bourbon barrels, Gary, are always like burnt inside, aren't they? They're always like charred.
Yes.
Is that true? Is that true of all barrels, or only bourbon barrels?
Absolutely not. No. I don't think it's exclusive to bourbon, but it's certainly more common in spirit than it would be in a grape barrel. So if you look inside of the wine barrels that we get in, if it's had a red wine in there before, it's completely pink on the inside, but you can see underneath that pink is the same coloured wood that is on the outside. But certainly whiskey's a big one for taking other barrels as well. It's not just brewers. Distillers will do the same. So anybody who is a bit more familiar with whiskey, they will see on there you get a sherry cask finish or a bourbon cask finish, things like that. So we do have whiskey barrels that have originally been used in bourbon distilleries, and those barrels do come in charred as well. But even then, some of those they do sort of diversify as well. So some of the bourbon barrels that we've had in, they've either charred the barrel itself, or they've just added essentially charcoal to the bottom of it. So when we've come to clean and prep the barrels ready for filling, as we're rinsing them out, the amount of charcoal and just black dust that comes out of the barrel that's not actually from that barrel itself is unreal. It's like almost blocks the drains sometimes. It's mad.
Wow.
When I was in Mauritius, when we got married, I did actually manage to have a look inside a couple of the rum barrels, because Mauritius is big for rum. And it seemed to be pretty much a 50-50 split. Some of them were charred and some of them weren't. So, yeah, I know what you're talking about. That I have seen that one firsthand.
Would that be a difference between sort of the light spirits, like a white rum versus a dark rum?
I think that's the refinement of the sugar.
Not so much. Yeah, it's the sugar and the age it's left in. So if you use tequila as an example there, if it's not been in for very long, the tequila stays light in colour. It'll either be completely clear, like you'd expect, like a glass of tap water, or might have that very slight golden colour to it. Whereas if it's one of the aged ones as well, when that starts looking more like a darker whiskey, that's because they've been sat in the barrels much longer. It's actually leaching the colour from the barrel itself.
Okay.
You see, this is all interesting stuff. I imagine there's quite a few people going to be hunting for 40-litre barrels pretty soon. We've already covered the next question about, is it bigger beers that are barrel aged, Impies and stuff? You've already said no, but anything over 7 goes. So would a 7%, I mean, do people barrel age barley wines?
They certainly do. We've released one already, and there is certainly a plan within the next couple of months to do the same again. We did one last year. I actually put the year on the label for it. So this will actually be released from the same guile, it's the same batch, same brew, but another 12 months on. Barley wines, it's one when you were asking for examples of what else we've got in there. It's the one name that actually completely escaped me when I was mentioning the wee heavy and American brown. But yes, we do have a fair amount of different types of barley wine in there.
And exactly who do I have to shoot, kill, suck up to, or give a deft massage to be able to get a tour around the barrel store, Gary?
That would be me, unfortunately.
I mean, I have very amazing thumbs and hands. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you've got my email address
Chris.
now. I'm sure we can work something out.
Chris,
cheers, Gary.
Don't put him off.
Yeah, I think it's.
I'm amazing at getting rid of them.
That right?
Yeah, the knots in the trapezius, mate. I'm good at getting rid of them.
Oh, that's reassuring.
No, I mean, I was thinking about coming over to Hebden Bridge to hit the tap room and have some food because the burgers are supposed to be legendary.
One thing that occurred to me, you mentioned losses a bit further back from the barrels that weren't in particularly good condition. Am I right in thinking that you lose a certain amount through kind of just evaporation as the beer's gone, because it is slightly, partially kind of porous in the barrels? And does that, I assume that would serve to kind of intensify the flavour as well?
So as well as just general losses from the barrel, it can certainly leak between the staves. There will be losses through evaporation. Just generally, same as there would be for any other liquid. If it's just sat around, it's going to eventually just dissipate off. There is also loss to the barrel itself if the barrel's been sat empty for quite a while. So Americans are sticklers for making sure they get every last drop out of the barrel before they send it anywhere else. We've had some barrels in the past from Europe where there is still wine in the bottom of whatever cognac and such. There's still a good portion in the bottom of the barrel that keep it wet, so the barrel condition is better. But anything that seems to be coming from stateside, they're dry as a bone. So with that wood being dry, it's going to absorb a moisture the second it hits it. Generally, losses aren't too bad as a whole, because we do try and make sure the barrels are in good condition before we fill them. So that there is an effort to steam them, not just for making sure that they're sealed, but also for any pathogens in there that we don't want in the beer. If we want something wild in there, we'll put it in. We don't want to find out it's there afterwards. But it also has the added effect there of sort of helping the beer, helping the barrel sort of absorb some moisture again, so it tries to keep as much volume as we can. But no, it is inevitable. There are some that always lose some volume, and the longer it's sat there, the more it's going to lose. But again, it certainly does help add to the intensity of it if it's only losing moisture from it. At the end of the day, the sugars are still there. To a certain extent, it's still there. That will also potentially evaporate off, but only at the same rate as the liquid, so it's not like you're going to lose ABV. But yeah, so if it's just essentially water that's being evaporated off, the intensity does increase. So that's why some of them do come across richer and stickier almost sometimes. We've had some beers that have gone in that have been an average body, not too bad on the flavour profile, and when they've come back out, it's not just the barrel that's had an impact on there. They come out almost like treacle, some of these. It's evident if some of them are leaking between the staves. You see when it dries on, all that sugar, it stays on almost like black tar. You will see it sort of stuck to the side of a barrel occasionally. So there is evidence there that it clearly is having an impact on it. So
that's pretty cool, man. I like that.
What sort of like ABV increase might you have on a beer during its time in the barrel, Gary? Do you have to test the beer quite thoroughly in terms of what the ABV is that's coming out for like duty purposes?
Yes, so exactly. As you just said there, for duty, we need to know exactly what the ABV is when we're packaging it for duty and for tax. It is a legal requirement. We're quite lucky in that, being a bit bigger, we have fancy equipment. So we have something called an alkalizer. Essentially, it takes a small portion of the beer, literally 10 or 20 mil, if that, and analyzes this, tells us exactly what the sugar content and alcohol content is in there, and it also is able to tell us a theoretical original gravity from there, and even how many calories are actually in that per 100 ml. It is a little bit insane that it tells us that, because we really don't want to see those in some of our big imperial stouts. But as far as ABV increase, that is also on a spectrum. So something like a straight up imperial stout in there, majority of the fermentation has already happened, if not all of. We put some in there that's come out of the exact same ABV. It goes into a fresh barrel that's still got a bit of moisture in there from its previous contents. Might see a couple of points, but nothing drastic. But if we're adding fresh fruit into the barrels, we've had some sours go in at 7% and come out. Well, there is actually one coming out very, very soon. It went in the barrel at 7.1. I believe it's come out at 9.8, and that's not the highest I've seen in there right now. So there are some big increases there with secondary fermentation.
Okay,
yeah.
so
I need that.
It's predominantly the secondary fermentation as opposed to evaporation.
Yes.
Of liquid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You might see 0.1, 0.2%, if that. But yeah, so if the secondary fermentation going on in there, whether it's with the addition of fruit or the addition of a wild yeast, that is where we see the majority of our increase. It also helps that. It doesn't help. It's also good to know that you're not actually supposed to leave anything in the barrels, liquid-wise, that's going to increase the ABV. That is a whole new level of duty and fines and such if that happens. So it's one of the reasons why people don't just throw a bottle of whiskey into a barrel. It's not good for the taxman.
No, because he gets paid tax twice, because he gets paid by the distillery and then he gets paid by you. One of the things that I just want to say is, if you need somebody to work all this fancy schmancy
absolutely
kit,
yeah, and we end up paying more.
Give me a shout. I'm good.
Yeah, we're always looking for new members of staff.
Science stuff. I'm good at science.
Expansion up here, it's exponential.
No, I reckon you could.
We're just about to take on a new lab tech, so if that goes well, we'll be taking more lab members.
Cool. Let me know, Gary. Send me an email. Cheers, bud.
He drinks and does science.
I drink. I do science, and I know a little bit about brewing. Cheers, man. I think at this point in time, I would like to draw reference to this beer.
I had one of those earlier. Very nice.
It's Halifax Panthers, which it's league, but we'll let them off. This is an absolute banger. I poured it out and I'm like, there's no fucking way it's that colour. You're a union man as well, aren't you, Gary?
Yeah, the malts we use. I am very much a union man.
I like you a lot. It's very, 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 very light. It's like barely coloured.
Yeah, the malts we use, the base malt that we use in the brewery, it goes on the paperwork as extra pale, but I mean that in itself is an understatement. I believe the colour on it, on average on the COA, so certificate of analysis, comes in at about 2.6 EBC.
Is this Muntons?
It's not Muntons. Muntons we have used in the past. We've used a range of different suppliers before. The current one is one on a larger scale. It's called Boat Malt. We use those because they can supply to us essentially at the drop of a hat on a very, very large scale. We actually use silos for our base malt. We don't use bags anymore. So we are, when we get a delivery, which is at least once a week, we are looking at approximately 26 tons a drop.
That's not them, is it? They're fermenters, right?
Those are fermenters. What you're looking at there is, well, the closest one to us is outside fermenter number 21. That runs 21 through 35 down that side.
Yeah, these guys, yeah, it's big. It's big as Vocation. I need to go and have a look.
An interesting question there in the chat from Eust. So the beers Obviously, some of the beers will be single barrel aged, but are you doing any blending as well of multiple
We
barrels?
have dabbled. We have dabbled. So we're blending both on an adjunct level and on a barrel type. So the new release coming up that I sort of hinted to before, that is going to be the same beer, but it had 2 different adjuncts added to it when we racked it. So that is blending back there based on the flavour profile we're looking for from it. But we have in the past blended different barrel types. So anybody who bought the birthday box last year, we had an Imperial Porter in there, and that was a blend of Pinot Noir barrels and bourbon barrels. Or more recently, we did release some of the Wheat Heavy in January this year, and that was a blend of single malt barrels and bourbon barrels as well.
Wow. And just for those of you who are interested, I found Gary's take-home beer. Like they've set it all up for him. That's Gary's take-home beer for last week. He's got another one roughly the same size for this week.
That is the Life and Death as well, isn't it? I think
it is.
That is empty. That is empty cans of Life and Death. Yes. So those whole pallets get loaded in. Those are empty. They get loaded into a machine that works essentially like a stair lift. I don't know if I actually sent a photo of that. No, that's further.
They're the full ones.
Those are full ones there. Yes. So that gets loaded in, and then one layer at a time. There is an arm that sweeps across and pushes them all into a channel on a conveyor similar to that, and that runs down a chute into the actual canning machine itself, which you should have a photo of.
I do.
There'll be numbers on it.
Hang on, give me a sec. I've just closed the window for some reason. It's that one, right? Is that one it?
Loading for me. One sec. No,
that one.
That's the one. That's the one. Yes, the FT unit. So it's just out of shot there. So just to the left is where that conveyor is. But you can see there's a bit of a slide. Yeah, so that slide down. It's got a cover over it because at that point there's UV treated water that is rinsing out the cans to make sure there's nothing in them that shouldn't be there. And once it goes down that chute into that unit, it is being it's on a rotary head. There's 24 of them filling simultaneously, and it does approximately between 10 and 14,000 of those per hour.
So it's just ever so slightly a bit slower than what I used to get when I was working at Coca-Cola, because we did 300,000 in a 12-hour shift.
Yeah, so that sounds like you're about twice as fast there.
That was one of the 14 lines, though.
Yeah. So that's our only one. But yes, it came in just at the start of the original lockdown. There you go. So you can see the numbers there. That goes round up to 24. So it comes down the chute. That spins round counterclockwise. No, sorry, that one's clockwise. No, right first time counterclockwise, and it comes back along the front and goes into another smaller one, which is where the lids go onto it, and they get the seams get fixed to the can at that point there.
Yeah, so take your cannula machines and shove them up your ass is basically what we're saying here. That's pretty cool, man. I do like this. I sat for quite a long time looking through these pictures going, that's pretty cool. That's really cool. That's, oh my God, how much beer's in there. That was basically about 10 minutes of my life. Just going, oh, I need to go here. So, yeah.
To be honest, I do exactly the same walking through every day. I'll walk through the brewery and I'll look at something I've forgotten about this day. It's like, yeah, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
It is very, very cool. I mean, all of the outside fermenters are all labeled OS as well, which is, let me pull this one back up. There you go. So they're all labeled OS. So do you have outside and inside fermenters?
Yeah, it's quite handy. We do have inside as well, but they are predominantly for either cask or for the barrel aged products, more or less now. Majority of what we brew ends up in those out there. They are at capacity. They're 120 hectolitres, but we brew 100 hectolitres into each. So 2 brews, which takes approximately 8 hours on a turnaround to fill each one of those. And yeah, 35 of them, as I previously mentioned. But yeah, so yeah, there's just a few of them. Not quite so many inside, but yeah, predominantly for cask or for the barrel aged stuff before it reaches barrels. The numbers will correspond to a screen that we've got inside as well. Everything is remotely operated, so we can control temperature, top pressure, CO2 regulation, basically everything. We can operate the entire brew house from a fancy screen. So we are a semi-automated brewery now, as of approximately 18 months ago. The heavy lifting for hop additions and gristing in, other than base malt, it's still a very much a manual job. But the actual brewery operation itself can be done from a screen by the brewery operator.
That's very cool. Now, I think what we need to do at this point is, Gary, can you please say, after like 2 seconds of silence, just say, Tricky and Parched, let's take this to the commercial break. Can you do that one for me?
I can try. Tricky and Parched, let's take it to the commercial break.
Let's do it.
Outstanding. I have to say, after this is where we kind of all have a bit of a second and just kind of breathe and, recover, because that was 56 minutes of hardcore explaining you've just done there, Gary. So let's all just grab a beer and let's go with it. I've got so much beer in my beer fridge that the fucking light does not even penetrate all of the cans. This is an issue.
Well, after all of the
darker beast.
After all of the chat of barrel,
I've gone big on the next one.
Go for one of the barrel aged ones, but I've got the saison that was previously mentioned.
Oh, the barrel aged.
You got the saison there. Oh, yeah. I'll be on that a bit later.
What's the ABV, Tricky?
Sorry?
What's the ABV?
It is 7.3%, so we're
nice.
Just at the entry point, I guess, for strength as far as the barrel aged beers go, based on what you were saying before.
Yeah, I don't think we've actually released anything lower. Or I think we've got maybe one or two in there, slightly lower than that, but not much. Simon's just asked what I was on, so that's why I was showing at the camera. I've gone for a kind of smash and grab on this one. So working my way up through the IPAs as far as ABV goes. This one's at 8, so nice and reasonable. I'll be breaking it up. On
8 is reasonable.
Our latest sour. Yeah.
8
so
is
I'll break it up
reasonable,
on the next one. It's a bit more reasonable. It certainly is.
Well,
any beer's a session beer. Just lengthy your session.
I'm not going to show. You can tell by mine that it is a barrel-aged beer, okay? That's what I've got next. However, I'm not going to show you which one it is because Tricky looks like he's already poured his. So come on, Tricky, let's go deep and meaningful.
Deep and meaningful? I'll just go, oh, that's nice.
Don't give me that shit.
So, a little bit more detail on this. We've got a traditional Belgian-style farmhouse ale with aromas of fresh bread, musky spice, and citrus. And it's had a secondary fermentation for 8 months in fresh Chardonnay barrels for subtle oak and echoes of white grape, fresh peaches, and tart gooseberry. And as you can see in the glass, got a little bit of haze on there. You probably can't see the bubbles, but it has got streaming carbonation. And you 100% get the that wine barrel character on the nose. In fact, it probably smells a bit more wine-like than it does saison-like to me at the moment. There is a little bit of that kind of spicy sort of saison note in there as well, but yeah, it smells like a glass of white wine predominantly.
Tricky, while you talk, I'm just going to put up some images of Yorkshire for people to drool over. Okay? That's what I'm going to do.
Behold God's country.
Absolutely.
And the beer that comes forth from it.
10p to make a phone call to God from Yorkshire, because you guys like international rate everywhere else.
It's like the juxtaposition of man-created brewery meets rolling hills of Yorkshire.
You can't fault it, really, can you? I mean, you've got the bloody Yorkshire Dales right behind you, mate.
And it's a poor day for taking a photo as well. You can see how overcast it was. Honestly, when you get a day like today, when it's blue skies, it can't be beat. What I should have probably done is send you some older photos as well. I've got some of my personal Instagram account where I've taken some sunset shots. Back when I was on the brew kit every day working night shifts as well, I've got some absolutely fantastic sunset and sunrises, some photos in the snow, things like that. It's absolutely unreal up there sometimes.
It's Yorkshire, Gary. It's unreal all the time up there, mate.
So anyway, back to the saison.
Yeah.
There is more pepper sort of on the flavour, but it's actually surprisingly sweet. It's not as tart as I was expecting it maybe to be. And yeah, lots of grape character. There's some other kind of stone fruit sort of fruit flavour in there too. It's very, very pleasant and easy drinking. I was expecting it maybe to be a little bit more, tart and funky, but it's actually, pretty smooth and fruity and fairly easy to drink. So, very nice. Next.
I fucking love a barrel-aged saison. I'm just gonna go out there and say it.
Did you get one of these, Owen?
No, I'm just a little bit too poor at the moment to have afforded to buy a large amount of beer from Vocation, but I'm hoping the discount code might work sometime in the next 2 weeks, in which case I will. But no, I have got some Vocation beers, but I don't have that one, Tricky, so enjoy it on my behalf.
I'll do my best.
Are you going barrel aged on your commercial beer, mate, or are we going to let Gary have a go whilst I sit here and try to control myself from cracking one out to this beer?
Mine's not barrel aged, but it is a Vocation beer. So, Gary, do you want to go?
Sorry, I've just been reading some of the questions there. I think I missed the question.
Oh, I said, what's your commercial beer? Go.
The one I'm drinking right now. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. The one I'm drinking right now is the Smash and Grab mentioned before. The next one will be the latest kettle sour that we've done, Death by Margarita. So Death by is our fruited sour range that we've done over the last year or so. This is the latest release in that, which is a salted lime and agave sour. So essentially trying to recreate a margarita cocktail, but in beer form. And I believe it's our second sourest beer we've ever made on pH. The most sour was actually a lemon sour IPA we did a little while back. But to put a number on it for you, this one came out at pH 2.62. So it's very tart.
You could clean your clean your oven with that.
Certainly clean your paintbrushes.
That's got to be puckering.
Certainly could.
Yeah, hopefully.
So as I'm sure you're aware, as I'm sure you're aware, kettle sours can range anywhere from about 3.5 down 3 as a general rule. This one we let it sour, just the base malt in there for souring. Then threw in approximately 320 kilos of lime into the 5, and that was another 200 kilos of agave syrup. And then the resulting pH and fermentation on that gave us 2.62 and 4.5%.
I've got a can of that in the fridge. I might just have to go and fetch that for
no, Tricky, there's no you might. Go now.
I'll definitely finish this, but yeah, maybe I'll go.
Yeah, at least you've had an advance warning now.
Yeah, I'll be prepared for my face turning inside out. I did do a lime sour beer myself a while ago.
Just in there at the bottom, if you want to pop it on the screen.
And it did really amp up the that sourness. Obviously, throwing in the extra lime juice, but it sounds like the one you guys have done is on another scale entirely as far as pushing that pH down.
I think the lemon one beat it by 0.0 or 0.0201. I think you got like 2.6 on the dot for that one. But that one we actually put the lemon in before adding the lactobacillus. And when we took a starting pH reading, we realised it was pointless because our lactobacillus only goes as far as 3 on the pH, and this thing started it because the amount of lemon we put in it.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, if nobody's talking about beer, can I talk about mine now?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have Vocation's barrel-aged old ale. Now, the reason why I got this one is because, number one, I don't particularly enjoy 14% beers. I'm not a big fan. I find that I prefer to have a few beers rather than a beer. But the reason why I chose this one specifically is because I haven't had an old ale for a very long time. But listen to this description, ladies and gentlemen, and let's see if this one gets you horny. A base of Chevalier malt, dark crystal, and traditional British hops combine to create a deep ruby ale with initial flavors of dried fruits. I'm getting plum and fucking prune up the yin-yang out of this one. It's gorgeous. With pine nuts and caramel. And they ain't joking about the caramel, because this is basically as thick as pouring molasses out of a tube. Aged for 15 months in fresh bourbon casks to infuse and accent the dominant aromas of oak and vanilla. Yes, it just smells of vanilla. It's amazing. The time in barrel provides the perfect conditions for a deeper body and a smoother mouthfeel. If you have not had an old ale, buy this. If you have had an old ale, buy this anyway. Because the one thing that I'm getting from this is not so much the age. I'm getting an almost syrupy sweetness with figs and prunes and plums and kind of just this deep. It's almost like it's been massively overloaded with Centennial. It's like a party in a glass, but it's thick as hell. And it's absolutely deep red. It's gorgeous. Now, I'm not a big fan of barrel-aged beers in general. I'm also not a big fan of higher ABV beers. I'll be nursing this 7.5 probably to the end of the podcast. But it's thick and it's coating and it's really sweet. It's incredibly fruity. And it's got this, I know what you mean by pine nuts, but it's almost peanut brittle. It's kind of a nut brittle kind of flavor. It's bloody gorgeous. It's an amazing beer. Really, really nice. One that you should invest in. It was well worth buying was that beer. Bloody gorgeous. Thick as hell. The smell of vanilla on the nose as well. That kind of, like when you get a glass of it's not quite Jack Daniels, it's more Jim Beam. That smell that you get on the nose, that really kind of uber thick, really strong vanilla. It's right there as well. Incredible beer. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love this beer. I'm going to order a few more of these beers. 7.5.
7.5, nice.
I'm going to order a few more of these because that's a proper sitting in watching TV beer. That's beautiful.
That's a crime. That's a crime series beer right there.
It's more of a. I'd enjoy drinking this while I'm watching Lethal Weapon the series because nice. Riggs is a bit mad. This beer's a bit mad.
Nice. It's good.
It's a good beer, Gary.
It's
You've
slightly
done well,
ironic
mate.
that you said it's more Jim Beam than. It's slightly ironic you said it's more Jim Beam than Jack Daniels because that actually came from Jack Daniels barrels.
It smells more Jim Beam than it does Jack Daniels. No.
Nice.
I don't profess to be an expert on barrel-aged beers. I mean,
no, I know exactly what you're saying. I do. Honestly, we do have a range of bourbon barrels in there, but yeah, the just from Jack Daniel's barrels, we've had so many different flavor profiles, even within the same beers. It's almost like the the fact that they are blending back themselves. It's not often they have the single barrel range for a reason. Not every barrel tastes the same, but when we're getting the single barrels from them, the range of flavors we can get from them makes entirely different beers, even within the same beer in the same type of barrel.
I'll tell you how predominant the flavor from this beer is. This is an incredibly strongly flavored vape. I couldn't taste it when I just took a hit because this is overriding everything. It's really coating. Such a great beer. Really nice. Guys, just go and buy some of this. Get some of their special releases in your life. That's amazing.
I'm going to buy some of that very shortly. Before I do my beer review, Gary, have you got any really exciting barrels in the store? Or any barrels that you're really excited about?
Yeah, we've actually got quite a few that we've not actually pushed out there yet. The most exciting of which to look forward to is a bit of a twist. So, like I said, I'm looking into finding some naked barrels, also some virgin barrels, but everything we released so far has all been about the liquid that was in them before. They've all been alcoholic. The next one, won't be the next one we release, but the next beer I would like to get out there will actually be a maple syrup barrel aged beer. So to put that into a little bit of context for you, maple syrup can be aged in a variety of barrels as well, same as beer can. What these maple syrup producers have done is get in touch with bourbon distilleries, get a load of barrels from them, age their maple syrup in said barrels, empty them, and then send them to us. These are some of the barrels that I mentioned before as well, where there's a lot of it left in there. And because it's not a alcoholic content that's in there, I was happy to leave them in there. So I'm really intrigued to see just how much of an ABV increase I get from some of these beers out of there. It's an absolutely fantastic stout base that went on for quite a while, just tweaking recipes just bit by bit till I'm happy with it. The Imperial Stout base recipe that I've had so far, and it's gone into some of my favourite smelling barrels. Hopefully before the end of this year we will see those out. As to when, I can't promise that yet.
Oh, that's you're gonna have to let us know on that one, Gary, because that sounds very exciting. Right, so I'm going to do my beer review. So I'm drinking Jump for Juice, which is from Vocation, which is a passion fruit pale ale at 5.5%. It says here, soft and medium bodied with tropical cocktail, juicy hop aromas and tart passion fruit finish. It's got Simcoe and Mosaic in it. And I have to say, on the nose, what's kind of nice is I'm not always a big fan of like fruited pale ales and that sort of thing. Sometimes I think that they can be a little bit overpowering with the fruit piece, and that it sort of moves away from being beer in my mind. Not sure if that resonates with you guys. But what's really nice is on the nose is you're actually getting a hop character. You're not just getting an artificial like fruit or a non-artificial kind of fruit aroma. So you're getting like a really nice hop aroma on there. It's a pretty dry beer. It finishes quite dry. It's got a lovely, obviously passion fruit aroma, but I'm almost getting like a calamassi lime type thing on there.
Like the Palermo from Omnipollo.
Yeah, almost like that. And it's just that lovely kind of citric, but more characteristic of like a citric aroma. It smells absolutely bonkers good. Really, really super juicy. But it's just nice that there's that hop character in there as well. So you know it's actually beer rather than it's just like, oh, it's alcoholic fruit juice. And on the flavour, you know, it's it finishes out nice and dry. It talks about that kind of passion fruit dryness at the end, and you get that, and it sort of just reminds me of sitting on the Yorkshire Dales, looking at a sunset, maybe seeing some nice fallow deer with it, some dewdrops in their eyes, maybe some honeysuckle and heather. It's a great beer. I took it too far there, didn't I? Went too far.
Not really, because I'd have been camped in a hide shooting said deer while you were staring at them.
Perfect. Well, I was enjoying that beer.
It does sound like a good one.
I've never been to the Yorkshire Dales, so I made that story up. But
how the hell have you not been to the Yorkshire Dales? It's the single most important place in the UK, man.
I'm a heathen. Chris.
You are a complete heathen.
What can I say? I'm a heathen that needs a piss, so do chat.
So there we go. We're down to you, Gary. It's your turn to review your beer, man. You've got to tell us all about it. You're muted, bud.
Slapping myself on mic there. I'm literally on the last little bit there of the smash and grab.
Okay,
it's an interesting one. Is this? It has yeah, and so it started out life as Life and Death's bigger brother. It's since become a beer of its own in the sense that it's no longer a mosaic. There is a hell of a lot going on in there. We fully went all out on that with the New England style because at the time it was the newest thing. So London Fog East, about 15% oats, 10% wheat, and Citra, Mosaic, Galaxy, touch of Sabro, and I think maybe a touch of Simcoe in the back of there as well. Hopping rates absolutely insane, somewhere in the region of about 11 grams a litre, I think. But yeah, it's a proper juice bomb. It's thick, it's sweet, it's full of peach, it's full of all your stone fruit. It's as soft as you like. The IBU on this is less than 10 in the beer. It's an absolute delight if you're not a fan of bitter beers. The citrus character's still there. There's plenty of pineapple. It's absolutely. The nose is all tropical fruit. It's papaya, it's guava, it's pineapple. It's on the flavour where you're getting more of the citrus and you're getting more of the softer stone fruits and the likes of the peach, or even to be honest, even a touch of cherry on the back of there as well.
Wow.
There's none of the savoury notes that you'd expect from some of those hop additions there. I think it's down in part to that being slightly bigger, we get access to a lot of the new fun, creative ingredients in the sense of there's not just T90 anymore for us. In fact, to be honest, I don't think we use anything that's just T90 anymore. We use a combination of BBC, Cryo, and Spectrum. So anybody unfamiliar with Spectrum, it is literally liquid hop. They're processed to a point where all the vegetation and plant matter is gone, and all it leaves in there is the flavour compounds that you're looking for.
Yeah, we were talking about this on the planning pod, on the planning chat that we had. It's all down to just removal of that vegetal matter, isn't it? It's all, avoiding any of the off flavors that you get from that vegetation.
Yeah, it has two benefits. Not only are we adding more flavor into there, more aroma into there in its purest form, eliminating those compounds that you don't want in there. It does also have the added benefit that the vegetation, that the actual pellets themselves aren't absorbing precious beer, so it does actually give us more beer at the end of it. So from a commercial point of view, to be honest, even on a smaller scale, because I know Incognito and Spectrum are available on a smaller scale, it does give us the added benefit that you're getting more beer out of it at the end. So why waste beer in dry hop when you can be drinking it?
No, absolutely. One of the questions that I've got for you, I don't know whether you want to give out the actual numbers, but let's take I don't know, Life and Death. Okay.
Yeah.
when it comes to a dry hop for life and death, exactly how much mass of hops are you adding to the fermenter for your dry hop? Just to give us a rough guesstimate.
I believe the cans used to say it. I don't know if they still do. It's probably a little bit out of date now, with the sense that obviously there is spectrum involved in there as well. But the can does state for every barrel that we produce, so 160 litres, there is 3 kilos of hops going in there. I believe with the addition of cryo, spectrum, and BBC as a whole combination between brewhouse additions and dry hop, we are adding somewhere in the region of about 65 kilos per 50 hec.
65 kilos, so 3 and a bit bags, unless you're getting them in the 100 kilo bags.
Ours come in 20 kilo boxes that are split into 5 kilo bags, so there's quite a few bags going in there for the hops.
Yeah, that's a lot of trips up the steps. That is.
It's a hell of a lot, and certainly if you can't carry a 20 kilo box, it's those steps that you've seen there and that height you've got to climb. There's a few of those you've got to do.
But if you can't climb a set of steps with a 20 kilo box on your shoulders, then should you even be brewing? I mean, that's the question, really. Yeah.
Honestly, the guys on the production floor now, they don't know how easy they've got it. The early days for me, the first original outside for me wasn't steps; it was a ladder. If you couldn't carry bags up a ladder, or you had to climb across the roof to get to it using a forklift up onto the roof. Honestly, that during the winter was some of the sketchiest things we've ever seen. It certainly wasn't health and safety approved. I'll put it that way.
Health and safety be gone, right?
Yeah, it was the only way we were dry hopping beers. You had to ignore the fact that health and safety was a thing.
Health and safety is, it's pointless anyway. Quick shout out to Maverick Brewing who's just joined us. Hoddy's on the poddy, people.
Hoddy in the chatty.
Hoddy's in the chatty. I think, is that everybody who's done their... Everybody's done their commercial. Owen's done his.
I did have to go and get that, though, didn't
you?
I?
Had to get the margarita. What's it called? Just put it up again.
By margarita, I'm on it as well now. I've just
it. Nice. A quick question before we move on to some more questions. When do you plan on releasing a Märzen?
To be honest, we almost did for Oktoberfest just gone.
Almost don't
way, unfortunately.
Gary, almost don't feed the donkey, man.
Yeah, I know, almost.
You would have sold the 24
I would like
can
to think
case
that something may be in the works this year. Just
I love
me a
Märzen
to go there.
No, man, let's get it done. Let's get it done.
Fingers crossed. We do like pushing the boundaries. We do like pushing boundaries and doing new styles. So fingers crossed. There may be something a little bit more interesting in the works for potentially in the volumes release this year. Obviously, the volumes for us has been focusing on a calendar event each month. Some of them are a little bit more obscure than others, but it'd be daft not to try and focus on an Oktoberfest beer or certainly German style for Oktoberfest. So
absolutely,
we'll see.
Got to be done. Got to be done. Tricky, do you want to?
That's pretty top.
Tricky's face just turned inside out. Outstanding. I can see his tonsils.
It's nice. That is
Tricky.
really, really sour.
Just to bring it back to reality, is there a lot going on there, Trick?
There's a lot of lime going on there, for sure. Yeah.
Wicked.
I mean, when I did the lime sour, it was like, I thought that was pretty much as an intense a lime flavour as you could get, but this is like that turned up to 11. It's
that's brilliant.
It's definitely nailed that, like, that sort of margarita salted lime vibe, though. Yeah.
Yeah, sea salt added right at the end, right as we're processing the beer, just before carbonation. So added enough quantities that there's an element there without it just like feeling like salt in your mouth. It was it's an interesting one to try and do. Obviously, we've done similar with salted caramels before, so it was nice to put a bit of a twist on it this time rather than focusing on the sweet aspect.
Oh,
that's the most terrible camera focus in the world.
Half an hour later.
Oh, the mint chocolate stout. He's gone after 8. 12.2. Oh, breakfast beer than Owen. Yeah, see, Owen doesn't have autofocus on his camera yet. Give him time. Right, Chicky, do you want to lead us into the second half of the questions?
Yeah, why not? So we had a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll just should we bring those in quickly because they kind of feed into some of the notes that we've got there as well. So I think one was related to using maple. So I think we've as homebrewers, we've probably read a lot of stuff about maple and how difficult it can be to get that flavour into beers because of the fleeting nature of that flavour when you put it into fermentation and it ferments away. So Brett, aka Harmon Brewing, was asking if you have any tips specifically, Gary, as far as actually getting maple flavour into beers. I've got that can next to me as well, funnily enough. But yeah, how would you go about it with a beer like
that? Couple of points really for that one. Obviously, like you just sort of hinted to there, the addition of maple is difficult to get the flavour across because essentially it's just sugar. The fermentability of it is nigh on 100%. So when you're throwing it in there, it pretty much all ferments straight back out. I found that honey and maple syrup are actually quite similar in the sense that you want to be adding minimum 5-10%, no, not 5, nearer 10% of your actual overall sugar content in there to get a decent flavour coming through for it. It also helps when you're doing so, obviously bear in mind just how fermentable it actually is, so maybe increase your mash temp a touch, just so you're not drying your beer out completely, especially if you're aiming for something like the stout there. Last thing you want is a really, really dry, really, really thin, you pick out the thin, decadent. And at the end of the day, if all that isn't quite working, there are other things you can do. So try and manipulate other ingredients a little bit more. So darker sugars, i.e. really dark muscovado or even molasses, they can add that smoky, thick, syrupy treacle sort of flavour you'd expect from a maple. And worst case scenario, there is always extracts. Extracts can be so that can there in particular, you might have also noticed it also says pecan on there. Nuts in a commercial environment of any form are generally a big no-no unless you want to put a massive warning label on your cans for the next 2 years. This one in particular we did not, because we did not add pecan to it. Extracts can be your friends across the board, because not only can you get the exact flavour you're looking for, but it also helps avoid the potential risks along those lines. Because we didn't want to have to put may-contain nuts on a can of Life and Death the next 2 years going into Tesco and everywhere else. We figured that extract would be the better use there. Maple syrup's another one there. Yeah. Honey's another one. That there are ways around it. If you're struggling to find the flavour there, there's no reason why you can't go down that route. It doesn't always have to be the fresh ingredient. We do try and use fresh wherever we can. We will use fresh fruit. If we were doing a raspberry stout, we'll put raspberry in it. If we were making a breakfast club, for example, was blueberry and blackcurrant. No, sorry, blueberry and blackberry. That had blueberry and blackberry in it. But we've done peanut beers. Snickers, the caramel peanut did not have peanuts in there because we didn't want may-contain nuts on all our cans. There is always a place for extracts. They can be your best friend. Don't be scared of them.
Yeah, you've segued perfectly into the point on the notes there anyway for us, so that's great. But yeah, so obviously at times essences and extracts are an option. Is it purely just about dosing, or the quality of the extracts as well, as far as trying to avoid that kind of like obviously artificial or synthetic taste? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not just about your dosing rate. You don't want a poor quality ingredient in there. You don't want old stale hops in an IPA. So why would you want a poor quality, really synthetic extract in there? It's all down to the quality of what you're looking for. If you want that synthetic taste, if you like the idea of the artificial flavour in there, if you're going old school sweets, there's nothing wrong with that either. But if you're wanting it to taste like the real thing, you can make it taste like the real thing even without using the real thing. It can be done. It just get your dosing rates right. You can trial those quite easily. There is a good point there as well. I just noticed at the bottom of the comments that as well, notorious for destroying your head retention on your beers. Coconut's another one for that. Hopefully it doesn't quite come with the same warning, but coconut, if I did wrong, you can say goodbye to any sort of head retention on your beer there. But yeah, so you don't want oils in the top of your beer, so don't have them in there. There's ways around it. And some that's actually usually do a bit of research. But it's not too difficult. If that's something you want to do, then there's no reason why you can't do
it. Just while we're on the subject of things that you may want to do as far as natural flavors go, Simon wants to know: is the Imperial Black Aged Kolsch aged on black cherries on the cards?
I keep telling him all he needs to do is get himself a commercial job again and come and do a brew day, because that's all I need to do to get a collaboration in line. Because he's a good lad. One since I've known Simon a very long time. I used to buy beer from Simon before I was brewing beer myself. So all he needs to do is line up a collaboration now, and we can get it on the cards. I've got a big enough barrel store. I can find space to put that beer in there for him.
I mean, there's a Hop Edition collaboration on the cards if you fancy it, man. That's all I'm saying.
I'll have a word. I'll see what we can do.
Probably would be a 12% barrel aged saison though, just to please everybody. But you know, the one question which did come up from the Swedish chef Thomas was, what about temperature control for the barrels? Is it a temperature controlled room?
We treat these. Yes, so the rooms themselves, there used to be all the buildings that are on site have skylights. We blocked off all of those in an attempt for insulation itself. Tried to insulate the walls a bit further, and then obviously there is cellar temperature control in there. We do treat it like a beer cellar in the sense that we keep it all in there below 12 degrees. Obviously, if we're looking for secondary fermentation on some products, we don't want it to be completely frozen in there. We don't want it like a blast chiller. So the temperature is low, fermentation will be slow, but when it's sitting there in barrels for months, that's no concern. But the last thing you want is a warm beer. You wouldn't leave a can of beer and drink it after 6 months and expect it to be in a decent quality. So why would you expect barrels to be the same?
That's pretty cool. Okay. I mean, that's a hell of a space to chill, so I'm assuming that you're doing that purely using some natural methods.
No, there is, apart from any sort of insulation that we can make into the room, there are massive chillers that you can get. Same as we would for any pub cellar, because it is a big open space, but because there is not a lot of foot traffic in there, it does sort of regulate itself pretty well without too much of an issue.
Okay, cool. Right. So now the question that all of these homebrewers who now want to move on to barrel aging their own beers want to know is, what's the process for cleaning these barrels? Is it purely, I mean, I'm presuming that you're not throwing peracetic in there or anything like that, given it's wood. So I'm assuming steam cleaning?
No, there's... Yes, it is exactly that. Yeah, we don't want any chemicals in there. Mentioned previous about the wood. If it's dry, it will absorb anything that goes in there, whether it's the beer. That's the losses in some of them. But yeah, so steam cleaning is certainly the most effective and fastest way. What we will use essentially is a spray ball that we'd normally use for a CIP or clean in place in the brew house. We take one of the smaller. We have a 200-litre tank in there we used to use for pitching yeast on site. We take the spray ball from that, attach it to a hose from the HLT, and we wrap the temperature right up on that. It spins around so that there's 95-degree water in there, obviously generating a lot of steam as well. That cleans it out quite thoroughly. We'll do that a couple of times just to make sure we're happy with it. And we do have wooden casks as well for dispense. So just the steel firkins, we do have some wooden ones as well, so 40-litre casks. And one thing we like to do with those, if they're going to be sat for any length of time, is that once we finish cleaning it, we bring the pH down to we refill that, bring the pH down to about 4.5, which is considered food safe. And at that point, we will dose in metabisulfite into it, which certainly on a smaller scale is more commonly referred to in the brewing industry as Campton tablets. Off the top of my head, unfortunately, I couldn't tell you what the dosing rate of that is, but it's really not a lot at all. It literally would be the case of a teaspoon in a barrel, half teaspoon in a barrel, or like one tab crushed, dissolved, and then that can sit there certainly for a few weeks or a few months without the barrel drying out and the wood shrinking, causing leaks and such there. So it's a good way of like maintaining the barrels while limiting the risk of infection.
Yeah, it's roughly 3 grams, isn't it? It's about 3 grams per 40 litres.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, it's not a lot at all. Like I said, the actual numbers escaped me there, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I'm just basing it off of like roughly a teaspoon because it's not a particularly heavy powder. It's quite light, quite dense, not very dense. So yeah,
very light, dissolves very easily.
Now, I have no clue which of us put this particular question in. I have a feeling it may be the old kilt wearer himself who put this question in. Independent versus supermarket. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that refers to, but what are your opinions on selling direct versus putting it in a supermarket and letting any muppet buy a can of your beer? I mean, obviously you don't want to limit who buys your beer. I get that. But at the same time, there are going to be some idiots who buy it. So, is there a difference between the stuff that you sell on your web shop as opposed to the stuff that you put in supermarkets?
The beer is exactly the same. I think the question might have come about just because it was raised about the fact that the early days as a brewery, the reputation of being a supermarket brewery came about. There is scope for all of it. Obviously, I'm happy to support independence. I want to support independence. It's not all about certainly for me. It's not all about making sure that the money's made at the end of the day. It is a passion thing as well. It's not just a business for any of us up there, even the higher ups and the owners and such. It is still a passion thing. It's not just make the money, see what the bank account looks like at the end of the year. Supermarkets are a great way for getting large volume out for us. It certainly gets us a decent income. It's a massive part of what we do. There's no denying that. But at the same time, it pays for things like this barrel store. Without the supermarket contracts that we've had over the last few years, we wouldn't be brewing on the scale that we're brewing now. We wouldn't have the team the size we're doing now. We wouldn't have as many bars open as we do now. And therefore, employment for us, we've got a massive team across the board. We wouldn't, like I said, we wouldn't have the barrel store. We wouldn't have 35 fermenters outside. We wouldn't be able to brew anywhere near as much as we're doing. We wouldn't have as much fun as we're doing, and it would probably still be quite small scale. It wouldn't be semi-automated. It wouldn't be we wouldn't be brewing the recipes that we're brewing now. The Death by Margarita, the Death by series, we wouldn't be brewing that. It's one of those things. The amount of things that we can do now because we have those allows us to support those independents as well. It's not just about the supermarket contracts. We brew, like I said before, we're brewing life and death 10 times a week at least, and majority of that goes to supermarkets. What's left over from that goes on just the exact same, but the money that's coming in from that is expanding the brewery. It allows us to be able to throw a ton of not Death by Cherries. That was the Curse of Death we did quite recently. It was a chocolate chili cherry sour, sorry, and that was an absolutely mental beer. That is one of the most expensive beers we've made this year because we literally threw a ton of cherries at it, a metric ton of cherries into 5,000 litres. And then the chocolate addition to that. Without the supermarket contract, we wouldn't be brewing beers like those. It allows us to be able to do what we're doing. And yeah, it's an insane number of special beers that we're doing, and we wouldn't be able to do half the fun things that we're doing or on the level that we're doing them without the support there and the steady income. So people are always going to be opinionated. Supermarkets do have a negative light for a lot of people, certainly those who are buying beer regularly and supporting friends and supporting the industry. But there's scope for everybody. It's one of those things. Without it, I certainly wouldn't be in the position I'm in now. So I'm certainly not going to say anything negative about it.
Gary, I like the way that you frame that in terms of like it allows you to do the exciting brewing that in a different frame that you'd be able to do if you didn't sell to supermarkets. And I think what's exciting for craft beer lovers, the people that are not necessarily buying the beer in the supermarket, but rather buying the beer from reputable bottle shops or buying from your web shop directly, is the fact that they get access to a lot more exciting beers from Vocation as a result of you selling beers to the supermarket, right? So it gives you a degree of scalability, it gives you a good revenue stream to be able to do more exciting stuff for craft beer.
And we have also seen that the rate of growth because of it, it's allowing us more exciting beers in the supermarkets. Just seeing a comment there, the Imperial Kirsch is lush. That is a cognac barrel-aged Imperial Stout with, I believe that was about a quarter of a ton of cherries per 50 hec in that one. That was on a Tesco shelf not too long ago. That is only in there because the original Tesco contracts allowed us to brew something insane that we wanted to brew. And it was that popular, Tesco said, we need that beer. That then helped us develop the barrel store. It's things like that. It does have a knock-on effect. It's not always about just making a bit of money at the end of the day. There is always development because of it. And it's not always as bad as people think. Supermarkets aren't always the enemy, certainly not on this aspect.
No, I will jump in right here, right now, and I will simply say there is a whole other side to it that a lot of people who are, let's say, craft heads, they don't really appreciate. And that is, if breweries such as Vocation brew beers such as the Kirsch Impy or this one, which I'm just about to crack open, I got introduced to this beer because I bought a can in Sainsbury's, right? This is one of my favorite beers of all time. I love this beer, right? If you weren't selling in supermarkets, number one, I wouldn't know about this beer, which would be a crime against humanity and be punishable by a trial at The Hague. Secondly, because of the fact that you're putting beers like this into supermarkets, you are then allowing people who do not sort of buy these kinds of beers the opportunity to see them on a shelf, buy them, and basically bring more people into enjoying the kind of beers that us people who maybe we brew ourselves, maybe we just got into the craft beer scene, maybe maybe we go to Tapped in Leeds quite a lot. The point is, people who wouldn't normally be exposed to these kind of beers are being exposed to these kind of beers. And regardless of, completely ignoring the fact that you're selling quite a lot of this beer in supermarkets, you're actually bringing people who would normally be drinking, I don't know, some fucking random bitter. And they're going, oh, that's chocolate. I'll try that. I'll get one for me and the wife. Then all of a sudden, they're buying like, oh, well, what else have they got? That kind of builds our little niche part of the craft beer world and allows people to try more of the things that we try.
Yeah, got to agree with that, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised that from what Gary said, that like a barrel-aged like Imperial Stout or whatever was a big seller in Tesco. That like, I'm kind of blown away by that.
It was happy.
Yeah, but that's the progression you get, right?
It was originally meant to go into it was originally meant to be going into a limited number of stores. That one, like really limited, like I think 4, and it was meant to be for 3 months. By the end of that, it was in the best part of a year, and I think it reached almost 80% of stores. And the scope for that was absolutely mental. We had more of it in barrels, and we need more. We had to buy more barrels to demand on that one, and it was. We did a banana as well. That's since gone. That was the same, and the mint choc that you run now, that is also in Tesco now, and it's doing the exact same thing.
It's very nice, Gary. It's great. It's very nice.
I think you're sort of pulling it back to where the whole conversation started. I've got no issue whatsoever with, sort of breweries going into supermarkets on a fairly big scale with their core beers when the quality of those beers is maintained at a level where it's going to actually pull people in to drinking those other, more exciting or experimental beers that you're putting out. And, for me, we've all seen various breweries that have upscaled and things have not gone well and they have not maintained quality. And the
Tiny Rebel,
the results, speak for themselves really as far as quality and perhaps in some cases their actual commercial success as well. But I know, and it's not just to sort of blow smoke up your ass or anything, but like if I go into a like a smaller Tesco's or whatever, and I see a 4-pack of Life and Death on the shelf, I know that I've got a rock solid, Citra Mosaic IPA that I'm going to enjoy there, and it's, as far as I'm concerned, great. I can go down to a smaller supermarket outlet and buy a beer that's that good. So I have no issue with it whatsoever, as long as the beers are still tasting great. I think you guys have done a great job of scaling up on that, particularly in that sense, as far as keeping the beer. And you were talking about, incorporating like Spectrum and Cryo and things like that into the updated version of that recipe, which kind of speaks for itself as well. You're improving on it as well as just trying to maintain it, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not going to deny it. Like you said, some breweries do struggle. The scaling up is a massive thing, and the very early days, it predates me ever as far as me working there. But yeah, it is a difficult thing scaling up to that sort of level, and breweries do struggle. Vocation isn't immune to that either. It did struggle as a brewery for keeping up with quality for the people who come to expect on an independent level. But at the same time, we've got back to where we'd like to be. In core products, we have this sensory every week where people are checking the beers, checking everything, all aspects. It's not just, is it good, is it not? How can we improve? And these new ingredients, Spectrum is not a cheap ingredient. Even for somebody like us who can order a lot of it at the time with buying power, it is not cheap. It is something that we are proud to be using, and certainly paving a way for others like us to do so on a smaller scale, because at the end of the day, we might be a big craft brewer. We're not a big brewery. I think somebody mentioned earlier about the scale of canning at Tadcaster, and their level of canning is insane compared to ours, and we get people coming up for collaborations that think they're never going to reach the level that we're at. So for us to look at that, it's a whole different level. So for us to be able to use some of these other ingredients and make our beers better, that's what it's all about for us. We just want to make the best beer. It's not about putting the most out there. It's about putting as much out as we can, but still making the best beer we can.
Gary, I'd just like to point out that you're currently in an Evanescence video, and you might want to turn the light on, bud.
I'll try with that one.
So Simon Seaton's out because he's got to be up early, so he's decided to leave. He's gonna check back in later.
Yeah, your headset, Gary, is glowing beautifully.
No worries.
It's gorgeous, mate. I love that green headset. I might have to buy one of those now. That's just amazing. Also, I'd like to point out this is probably the 20th or the 30th can of this that I've had. I decided it was so good I put it in my gold Vocation glass.
Oh, you sexy bitch.
I know, mate. I know. You just want to nail me right now, don't you? But you can't.
Couldn't find my gold one for tonight. I wish I could.
For those of you who've not had, For those of you who've not had Sweet Temptation, it's a Brew York collaboration with Vocation. It's a chocolate caramel stout, and it's 6.5%. I'm fucked already. I'm going to be even more fucked at the end of this can. It's such a great tasting beer. It's difficult to put down. Right, this is a great beer.
I think Vocation and Brew York, like both breweries, make just such brilliant dark beers. I think you guys like really specialise in that like super nice big dark beer category. I know Brew York makes some amazing, like the Tonka bean kind of stouts that they do are epic. Yeah, keep doing it, Gary.
Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Yeah,
you're not doing it badly.
Tonka. They're not the only ones that can do Tonka. There we go. First time. Straight out the bag.
I bloody love a Tonka.
I did mention.
Here we go.
I did see somebody mention before. Unfortunately, I think this one is now sold out on our website. Someone mentioned earlier about the birthday box. I saw it in the chat with the Belgian stout. This extra in the same barrels, and then we've conditioned it with some Tonka in there as well. And to be honest, this is probably my favourite beer we've done in the barrel store so far. It might still be available in some of your independents, available direct internationally. Sorry, guys.
Gary, what's the chance of putting Sweet Temptation into a bourbon barrel for a year?
I think something like that needs a bit of a special treatment. Why would you, if we can do or triple or make it an imperial version?
Okay, make it happen, man.
Add some Tonka beans.
I'll be back in 2025. Make it happen. The one other question that we've got, and we're gonna harken back to the conversation just before the commercial. We want to touch on barrel aging anymore. Given that you have so much experience, given the fact that you basically lead it, what's your advice for anybody who's wanting to buy a barrel and get into the barrel aging side on the homebrew scale, or based on the fact that we have, I've got to go so far back up, Maverick Brewing, who you're probably not aware, Martin Hodinot owns Maverick Brewing. He went commercial roughly the same time as he won our competition. We did a competition last year, a homebrew competition. What would you give as the kind of the advice to anybody wanting to make a start on that?
Jump in at the deep end, basically. We did exactly that, and we've not looked back. If you're happy with your imperial stout recipes and you're happy with your practices, to be honest, barrel aging, it's just, I was going to say it's a barrel of laughs then, but it just sounds atrocious. Honestly, it's
it's a good pun. It's a good pun. Keep it.
It wasn't an intentional like fun now, but honestly, it's so much fun. Just being able to even just trying it occasionally, seeing how that beer is developing, giving you a rough idea of what you can expect as a final product at the end of it. As we mentioned before, it doesn't have to be a 200-litre barrel. You can get firkins, you can get 40 litres, you can get pins in wood, you can get a 20-25-litre barrel. It doesn't have to be big scale. You can barrel age on a homebrew scale quite comfortably. If you want to replicate a bourbon barrel, throw a bottle of Jack Daniels in there or bourbon of choice, roll it around for a week or two, let the barrel soak it up, distill it off, pour it off at the end. You can use that to then soak some chips if you want to, or you can put it back in once you've emptied the barrel.
You could drink it out. You could drink it.
You could drink it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But yeah, absolutely, you can decant it back into the bottle, and then once you're finished with the barrel or with that beer, clean the barrel out, throw the bourbon back in there. It's a good way of keeping it clean too. At 40%, there's not going to be much that grows in there, so it's a good way of sterilising too, and in a safe way. So, honestly, if you can and you want to,
What's your preference on the bourbon that's going in? What's your choice?
My choice. That's a tough one. I'm a big fan of Heaven Hill. Big fan of Four Roses. I mean, we have a hell of a lot of Jack Daniel's barrels in there. Certainly some of the more exclusive Jack Daniel's products I'm a big fan of as well, always have been. My go-to when it's not a pint at the pub is usually a JD and Coke, so there's nothing wrong with that at all. But no, to be honest, honestly, given the choice, I'm going to have to go with the Four Roses for me, for bourbon of choice. So yeah,
nice,
get some of that in there, get it rolled around in the wood, decant it off, get the beer in there, and I mean a fourth option there. Once you've decanted it off, you've aged it in the wood, brush in there, and in your pint glass with your Imperial Stout. Really get the bourbon going.
Yeah, I like
this
Four
guy.
Roses.
Ain't shy, is he? You know, he ain't shy about the ABV of his beers. He's right in there.
This is my current go-to, Gary. That's decent.
I've seen that about, but I've not tried it. I am interested.
It's supposed to be a homebrew podcast, not a bourbon podcast, boys. Come on.
That's a 47% barrel proof bourbon.
Well,
nothing wrong with cask proof. Cask proof is good.
Just before we jump like balls deep into impies and get your wisdom on impies, Brett Simmons, the shortest Brett, because he's like 5'2". He has a question about water profiles and the yeast that you use for your different beer styles. I'm presuming that you're using like yeast suppliers. They come in buckets and away you go. That's a presumption, probably not true. But what about the water profiles? I'm presuming you're just simply treating the water that you've got. I've got a mosquito in here. It's really pissing me off.
Yeah, we are treating the water. Every style of beer has its own profile treatment. So water profile is just as important, as far as I'm concerned, as choosing the right type of malt in the brew. Obviously, darker malts are notorious for bringing your pH down. That can have a massive impact on not only flavour profile, but your fermentability as well. So treating your water right there, getting some bicarb in there is so important that you find the profile that works for you as a preference there. But you've really got to think about that. It's not just about getting the right malt profile, getting the right hop profile. It is key. It's paramount to it. Everything we do, we start at the water. It's not just a case of picking which malts and what ratio of crystal or chocolate or roasted barley. It's all about getting it right. Yeah, there you go. See,
I only bought
we get ours in slightly bigger bags, but it's the same stuff. It's the exact same stuff. So just get the ratios right. Make sure. Yeah, no, it's obviously there's your main salt with the calcium, sulfate, chloride, magnesium, sodium, and then bicarb. But it's getting that ratio right. Bicarb is a good one for keeping your pH balanced. Absolutely. Sodium as well. It almost adds sweet and drinkability aspect to it as well. So it's a good one to get in there in your stouts. As Farlow, we are just using house yeast for the most part. So we have 3 different strains in house. We've got one for bright products, which also sort of translates across in our stouts. We've got one for the hazy products, which is a derivative from London Fog, and then we have our own lager strain as well. Anything else specialty that goes in, so obviously with Belgians, so the Saison, no, the Belgian Stout. There's various other ones, so we do look at different hazy yeasts and such as well. We've got a few new beers coming soon. We've trialed a few new yeast, but no, we have 3 house strains running at any one time, and yes, most of our stouts come through the same strain. It's the same. It's similar for the most part for us.
Yeah, we're not going to ask for any major details because we know that you won't give them to us. let's go balls deep into impies right now, because now's the time. If people are wanting an impy for Christmas, we're pretty much at the point where you should be brewing it. If you abide by brewing calendars, which everybody knows I fucking hate. But on the subject of impies, what are your top tips for brewing a good imperial stout?
Top tips, as previously mentioned there, getting the balance right across the board. So making sure your water profile's right, making sure the ratio for your malts is right for the style you're brewing. There is no wrong ratio when you're looking at how much roasted barley you're adding, how much oats or wheat or just any other type of adjunct malt for that matter. But depending on the style you're brewing, make sure you're getting the right ratio. If you're adding adjuncts in there, don't go cheap on them. If you're adding coffee there, don't just buy cheap coffee because it's just adding something else to it. If you're adding coconut that you can find, it's about same as anything else. It's when people talk about cooking with wine, you use a wine you have very cheap one. It's just wine to cook with. Use good quality ingredients. Make sure that is paramount there. For me, is all about balance and good quality ingredients.
You sound like a chef, mate. I like that. Is there any ingredients when you're making an impy that you've actually found are best to avoid, or ones to definitely include?
See, obviously we've got a bit of a reputation for thick, sweet stouts. The way you achieve that primarily is a high FG. So for things like that, if you're wanting a thick, sweet stout, you need to get your balance right. Don't be scared of putting more roasted barley in there. People try and keep that to a minimum. People are always scared that too much roasted barley is going to make it astringent, really harsh, almost smoky and burnt flavour to it. That balances really, really well against the sweet. Sours are the same, just to sort of sidetrack. If something's not coming across as sour enough, it's probably because it's too sweet. It's not that the pH is wrong, it's because your beer is too sweet. Stouts work exactly the same. If it tastes too sweet, it's probably because there's not enough of a roast characteristic to it. Make sure you get that right. So people do like experimenting with recipes. They will work at the same, but we do exactly the same. I do the same at home, I do the same at work. It's one of those things. If you're not happy with a beer because it's too sweet, add more roast characteristic to it. It's the perfect thing I found for balance. Failing that, a bit more sulfate. Like I said, coming back to the water profile, get the water profile right. Sulfate, a sort of a bitterness to it without coming across as bitter in the sense of coffee roast or hot bitterness. Sulfate is a fantastic ingredient for you for doing that, whether you're adding it as magnesium or as calcium. Calcium obviously has its own benefits there, but magnesium is another good one as well. Magnesium is a fantastic nutrient. So if you're trying to buy EV and trying to get that little bit more balance there to balance out the sweetness, get a bit of magnesium sulfate in there. There's so many different little adjustments you can make to a recipe. It doesn't need to be massive changes. Just get the balance right. There's always ways around it. Things like it's not just about is it chocolate, is it coffee, is it too sweet, is it too sour, is it too bitter. There's ways around it without looking at the malt or the hops.
I've got to agree with that. I have discovered recently that I'm not a massive fan of super bitter beers, and I found that adding a little bit of sodium chloride, just adding a little bit of salt to it, just kind of nullifies that a little bit, allows everything else to shine through. So I'm right there with you on the water profile. It's such a complicated part of brewing, though. I mean, I think I sat down and worked it out, and I stopped when I got to 41 trillion sort of different variations that you could make, and that was purely maths. There's got to be close on an infinite number of beers that you can make based on adjusting your water profile, adjusting your hops, adjusting your hop timings. It's just fucking huge.
Yeah, water profiles and additions, the simplest and most complicated thing you will ever do for changing beer. When you understand it and you know what you're doing with it, the slightest change can make an entirely different beer. It can be for the better, it can be for the worse. It's something even still play with. Certainly with our New England styles, we're looking at chloride to sulfate ratios, and whether I'm more sodium or more calcium to get the chloride in there as well. Chloride is one of adding sweetness to it. So when I've gone in quite a bit there about sulfate making it more bitter, chloride does the exact opposite. It gives a perceived sweetness without tasting like sweet. So it's a high chloride in a New England style is a very, very popular way at the moment of making it seem sweet, because of perceived without making it taste like it. So it's all about getting that balance right there. It's like, that's why I came back to it before, so it's the most important part of what you're doing. It's not about getting your hop right or getting your malt. If you're not getting it right, you're not going to be onto a winner to start with.
No, I agree with that one. As far as brewing an Impy, I mean, I have my own opinions on this. I want to see if yours kind of tie in with it. But your Bugu ratio, so getting that bitterness to sort of sweetness right. I think when we brewed the whatever that racist company is in America, when we brewed that one, Tricky, jokes.
Founders.
Yeah, jokes. What did you end up as your Bugu on that one? Because I ended up at 0.91.
I've got no idea off the top of my head, but the IBUs were higher than you would expect.
Yeah, they were ridiculous. They were really, really high. So as far as sort of the Boo to Goo ratio, Gary, what would you reckon? I mean, are you just aiming for a balance, or are you aiming more to kind of counteract that residual sweetness with the bitterness?
To be honest, that literally changes with every recipe. It completely depends on what we're brewing. So the one I've just cracked now is this beautiful creation. I'm so happy with this beer. Yeah, so collaboration we did. So Imperial salted caramel coffee Tonka stout, and the amount of different things that gone into that start to finish, when you actually look at the adjuncts as well, it's absolutely insane. So not only did we have to balance the water profile right, we had to get the FG right, the level of Tonka that's in there, we had to get that right. We had to make sure that we weren't making it too bitter or astringent with the malts, because there was coffee going in there. There was going to be caramel. We didn't want to get too much sodium in there on the water profile, because we're putting salt in at the end to make it salted caramel. It changes with every single recipe. Honestly, it's like I said, it's just about finding that right balance of what works for you. If you know what style of beer you're brewing, if you want it to be a thick, sweet, syrupy dessert stout, get a high FG, get more chloride in there, keep the sulfite low, keep the roasted barley low. If you're looking for something a little bit more traditional, keep the FG lower, get more roasted content in there, make sure you're getting more sulfate in there, make sure that you're getting a decent hop profile in there as well. You don't need whirlpool hops, you can manage it all with kettle additions, you can manage it with first wort additions. It's just about making sure that what you're writing as a recipe is to target what you're trying to create at the end.
So you'd be changing up your water profiles as well, beer to beer, rather than having a sort of standard go-to for Imperial Stouts, as far as the
to a certain extent.
So
we do have a standard that we go to for each style. When we're writing the initial recipe out, we will look at that. As that playing around with it like this beer, we'll then take a revisit at that and say, is this the right profile we're looking for that? But for the most part, when we're brewing a stout, if we're brewing like Sweet Temptation, or for example, we're brewing that, or brewing Naughty and Nice, there's your profile, that's what you're doing. If we're producing something along the same sort of lines on a bigger scale, we won't play with the recipe there. If we're looking at something more traditional, want a dry, robust, rich coffee stout, then we might look at taking some of the chloride out of there. We'll make sure the FG is a bit lower on it. But at the same time, we'll make sure we're backing that up with bicarb, because at the end of the day, the astringency on that is going to be really harsh. So having bicarb in there, bring the pH up a touch, balances it out a little bit more.
Typical sort of sweet stout kind of starting point for a water profile would be chloride heavy, presumably.
Chloride and bicarb, chloride and bicarb. Keep the sulfate low.
Sorry, I was just drinking one of those sweet stouts now, so that was.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying this one. I've not had it for a little while, so yeah, that's next on the list for me. It's still sat there. Gone for the Tonka first.
So Gary, like, if I was to, as an avid home brewer, I'm 4, 5, 6 years into my home brewing thing, and I want to buy a barrel, a small barrel, maybe 20, 30, 40 litres. What advice would you have for someone in that scenario in terms of getting into barrel aging? Maybe just having a single barrel. What might you start to get them to think about in terms of starting out? What do you want to do with that barrel? How do you want to maintain it? What should you think about in terms of, like, from what you're brewing, then into, like, with intention of putting it into a barrel, yada yada.
To be honest, other than doing the initial research on how to actually maintain the barrel, other than that, it's all about the experimentation at that point. Once you know how to maintain the barrel, clean barrel, how to sort of condition it if it needs conditioning, and should ever have any issue with any minor leaks, simple things like barrel wax, where do you source that from, how do you use it? It's one of those things. It's just general upkeep is the only thing that I would say do some research on. Other than that, it's all about having fun when it comes to barrels. Get the barrel, put what you want in it, and see what happens. Essentially, it's how we started. We had zero background in any sort of barrel aging for any of us in the brewery. Everything we've done, it's all learning on the job, essentially. When we had 4 barrels, we put it in there, hope for the best, and what we learned from that helps us develop more. We got 12, then we got 40, and then we got another 100, we got up to 60, then 100, then 400. It's all been learning on the job, and essentially, even on occasion, now it's still getting in touch with other breweries, finding out what they're doing, or even a quick Google search, just because we're not 100% happy with what we're doing as far as routine. But other than making sure you know what you're doing for upkeep of the barrel, just have fun with it.
They do sound like they're a great deal of fun. Quick question from Brett Simmons. When you're there you go. When you're mashing in, do you add your darker grains at a later stage of the mash when you're doing impies?
We will get a base edition of your extra pale malt in there, but that's only because that's what's in the bottom of the grist case when we're loading. Other than that, we try and actually get as much of an even spread through the rest of it as we can. So a typical grist and imperial stout for us is approximately 2 tons in our mash tun. We will get maybe 300 kilos of base malt in there at the start, and then through the next 1.7, which obviously includes the darker malts as well, the roasted grains, we will try and get those mixed in. So while the silos are filling the grist case, the guys are manually loading the sacks of the darker malt and the oats and the wheat. It all goes in together, so it all blends together when it comes through the auger into the mash tun. So the better, the more of a blend. So that's looking at the top of a life and death through the porthole there. Unfortunately, we weren't brewing a stout when I took the photos, but we will try and get as much of an even mix of the grains as you can. Obviously, friability and enzyme reaction that you're looking for in the mash tun is lower in darker grains because the roasting them actually obviously denatures a lot of the enzymes that are working, so you need that base malt in there to be able to do that. All science for you there.
I love the fact that you're using the proper scientific terminology as well. I like you, Gary. You're all right. Come on again.
It just comes as standard, to be honest. If we're brewing 6 times a day, it just becomes second nature. I end up talking to people in the pub about it, and they look at you with the most blank faces you've ever seen. You've got to explain what you're talking about.
I have that with the other 3 fuckers I do the podcast with most days, mate.
But yeah, to sort of summarise that, we do need a good mix in there, because without those enzymes, you're not getting the sugars out. You're not getting that conversion from starch, and you're not going to end up with a very fermentable beer. And it doesn't always come across very well with the flavour profile either if it's not getting mixed in well. So you do need to make sure that it's sort of blending together to be able to get that good runoff, to get the full utilisation of the malts that you're adding. So no, yeah. So we don't throw it all in on the top. The only exception to that is when we're brewing something that's hop forward. So if we're looking for like black IPA, for example, we're not going to mash in there with a load of dark grains, and we're not going to get a roasted profile in there. We'll wait till the end of the mash stand, and as we start sparging, we might coat the top of the bed in Carafa 3. And at that point, that's when we get all the colour from it without any of the residual flavour from it. So we get the colour that we're looking for. If you're looking for black IPA, we'll change the profile of the salts there. We will make sure the FG is slightly different to get the desired flavours and desired profile that you're looking for a black IPA without it tasting like a glass of coffee and hops.
That actually was a question that I had as far as are you a Carafa or a roasted barley guy, or more of a mix of the two?
Both, completely situational. Depends what you're doing. So Belgian styles that looking to be dark and you don't want a massive coffee or a chocolate profile, get your Carafa in there. Get your Abbey malts. If you're looking for a big stout, all the roasted malts. Just get the balance right.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Carafa because of the coffee nature that it tends to give, but I understand that the roasted barley is also, quite popular as well.
Yeah, so you said about not being scared of
roasted barley is good for giving
roasted, but sorry, you said about not being scared of the roasted barley. What about black malt? Do you guys use that at all? Because that's the other one that a lot of home brewers sort of go, oh, black malt, that will ruin your beers because it's so potent or whatever.
We have used it. We have used it. Certainly not. It's not a regular appearance, but we have used it in the past and will continue to do so. It is a great one for that if you're looking to get the colour there without too much of an addition on the flavour. Certainly, like you would expect with the varying crystals and chocolates. Yeah, it's an interesting one for that. But
not so much for the roast flavour
when you were asking there before Carafa versus it is a very good one for getting colour across, but I found that the flavour that comes from that is certainly a lot more astringent than roasted barley. So certainly on our kit, it doesn't work quite so well for the flavours that we're looking to put across.
Wow. Unless anybody else has any other questions, I imagine there's quite a few. Do we have any more questions for Gary?
No, I think I'm
spent.
I'll be honest with you. I've got this weird urge to buy a small barrel and see where.
Can't think why. What's giving you that idea, Chris?
I don't know. I mean, I'm feeling enthused to go and buy a small barrel. I'm going to wait until after I've been over to Hebden Bridge and had a wander around the barrel store and had a sniff, because it's all about having a sniff. Other than that, guys, I think what we should do right now is we should say thank you to Gary, and we should let Gary announce something that came through from a certain gentleman called Jamie, I do believe.
Exciting.
Yeah, a fellow colleague that runs a certain web store that you may have purchased a few beers from this evening. Certainly, the guys who supplied my beers for this evening have been very kind to supply us with a very, very nice little discount code for the podcast. So anybody wishing to purchase any of the beers we've been drinking tonight, or certainly any others that may be there for the night, all you'll need to do at the end is type in Hop Edition 10, and that will give you 10% off on any purchase on our web store.
I just want to suffix this.
Gary.
I mean, thank you. That's awesome.
That's amazing. Cheers.
But can I just point out, guys, that you have to be over 50 quid with the discount code in order to get the free shipping. So play around with those beers, because you can get a lot more than you think. I ended up with 26 before I actually got the over 50 quid free shipping.
I think.
Yeah. There's some absolute bangers on there as well. The margarita.
This one's great.
The pecan pie. The tonka bean.
Drinking that straight off the back of that was an experience. That was for sure. That's a real contrast between two beers, if ever I've seen one.
I can't say that I've had a bad beer from Vocation. I don't think I've had one that I don't like.
Passion fruit pale was excellent.
That's in the fridge, that, Owen. I'm going to be having that in a bit.
Yeah, that was great.
So, guys, remember, Hop Edition 10. Hit the Vocation web store right now. Let's try and crash their site. Hop Edition 10 will get you 10% off. All the beers that we've drunk tonight pretty much are available on there, including this outstanding old ale. Legendary. I mean, that is fucking brilliant. Get yourselves over there, hit in and get yourself 10% off. And say thank you to James at Vocation, because he's the one who sorted us out. And Gary's going to be cracking open another beer anytime soon. Gary, are you
very reasonably priced beers anyway, without even before the discount? To be fair,
that is true. I can't believe how cheap it was to get the basic box or whatever it was called, or I can't remember what the box was called, but I got like
the core range one that we
I got this glass and like a shitload of beers. And I think I got that included, plus another 12 that I chose myself. And it came in at like 55 quid or something. It did amazing.
Yeah, seeing as how Imperial Stouts have been one of the topics for the night, I do believe there is also a box set on there called Dark and Decadent. I think it's a 12-pack with 4 different Imperial Stouts. So there's the Maple and Pecan, I think the S'mores, the Tonka that I'm on now, and maybe the Affogato, which is coffee and vanilla. All of those, 3 of those each.
That's got to be worth a punt. Has to be in there. Also, I would highly recommend the gold glass, because not only is it like a perfect size to hold the 440ml can, it also looks pimp as fuck. Just saying that.
Yeah, when you've got a full can, you can read the label, read the gold against the black. It looks fantastic.
No matter how dark the beer is, it still shows up. It's very, very cool. Gary, are you available to stick around for sort of 20 minutes, half an hour, have a chat with the guys?
He's got about 50 more beers to put through, hasn't he?
I can stick around as long as you like.
Gary's around till 2 in the morning, so all the Norwegian
I've got 5 more to get through.
Guys, I want to say a big thank you to Gary for coming on. We have bombarded him with questions. We have picked his brain. I've tried to get a job out of it. We've seen some awesome pictures and genuine... Look, he's set up, boys. He's set up. If you've got any more questions, if you're currently on the live chat and you want to join us to ask Gary any questions that you wouldn't want to ask him online or you don't think he'd answer online, it might be worth joining the Jitsi meet. I'm going to stick a link up to that pretty soon. But I want to say a huge thank you to our Patreons. You guys are really helping us to bring people like Gary to you guys to get the information that you want. I also want to say a huge thank you to Brewkeg Tap, our commercial sponsor. I also want to take this opportunity, and I know Owen is currently muted, but if you haven't seen the response video to the video that we put out yesterday at 5 o'clock announcing the competition winner for the Firmzilla with everything, you need to go and look at Biggie Banana, who won the competition with his Hebrews 24/7 naming of my beer. You want to go and check out his response video because it's awesome.
Mondo Bevies
is absolutely amazing. So fair play to Stevie Burt and Biggie Banana. That was just amazing.
Fucking other than that, Wednesday.
Yeah.
The editing on that was just class.
I wonder which Scottish tartan wearing crazy man it was who said that. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us, Gary. I really, really appreciate it, mate. It has been absolutely superb.
Yeah, no, not a problem at all. More than happy to to get involved in these sort of things. It's like I said earlier, it is a passion project. It's not just a job at the end of the day. I got the position where I am now purely because I started out brewing at home and made friends within the brewing industry. It's something that's going to continue certainly long into the future as far as I'm concerned. And more than happy to be here tonight, and thanks for having me on.
Hey, you're more than welcome anytime you want,
Thanks,
mate.
Gary.
It's a pleasure.
Hop Edition 10 is your discount code. Go get 10% off Vocation beers. And other than that, I just want to say thanks for joining us. We'll catch you all soon. Say bye-bye, people.
Bye-bye.
Ta-ra.
No, guys.
Right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up Jitsi Meat. And I'm going to get a link and I'm going to post it into both of the chats so that everybody can join.
And that's getting it wild, Gary.
Now shit's going to get real, bro.
We're not live. We're
I might need a quick toilet break first, but that's fine.
Hey, you go for a pee, man. It's all good.
Go now.
Go now. Definitely go now.
Fine.
I think I've closed
Your Dayglow headphones.
Right then. So if you're currently on the Discord, if you are a Patreon, the link has just gone in. We aren't on there yet. Other than that, I'm going to post a link in the chat. That is the link to the Jitsi Meat. If you want to ask Gary any questions, that's the link for you to click on. Other than that, everybody else, thanks very much for joining us. Hop Edition episode 70 is in the bag, and we're going to go and drink more beer and pick the brains of everybody. And if anybody has the fucking audacity to ask Gary what his favorite Take That song is, I won't be very happy. Yeah. Other than that, I'm going to end the broadcast now. So everybody's got the link. We'll catch you soon, people.